And welcome back to the Sooner Surge. Today we are joined by a very special guest, voice of the Mustangs, SMU play-by-play announcer, Rich Phillips. Rich, appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Hey, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
So, what are kind of your expectations for this matchup between OU SMU? First matchup between the two programs in a long time.
Hard to tell, it's hard to tell on either team, I think, after week
Mm-hmm.
one. SMU with a nice win over La Tech on Saturday, one in which they were up 31 nothing at halftime, and they really didn't put anything on film for the second half. And obviously, you guys saw the Sooners play, and I don't know what kind of a read you can get from that. I know
Yeah.
definitely OU trying to make a pretty big comeback from a disappointing season last year, and SMU entered this year with probably as high as expectations as I have seen in the 23 years that I've worked here. So, interesting matchup for sure here in week two.
Yeah, hey Rich. As far as SMU, a lot of transfers, and that defensive line, they had a really good. I mean, what, 6 sacks in week one there. Just it seems like that unit is in particular is really on the upside for SMU. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's where a lot of the transfer work on defense was done, was on the defensive line. Two of the starters up there were guys that were at Miami with Rhett Lashley a couple years ago when he was the OC there. They brought in Jordan Miller, who's playing at tackle, Elijah Roberts at ends. They both were factors. You guys are probably familiar with Corey Roberson at
Yep.
defensive
Yep.
tackle. Trust me, he was a factor with the pick six on
Mm,
Saturday.
yep.
They got another transfer, Cameron Robertson from North Texas, who played really well, I thought, Saturday. They're playing easily two full D lines and could play, I think, three full defensive lines in their four-man front. And it was really a focus of the offseason, and it looked like, at least for 1 week, it was a pretty good outcome they had with what they brought in.
Yeah. What about Preston Stone? I mean, highly recruited guy. Uh, first start there. So just tell us a little bit about what we're going to be seeing in him.
Well, that was his second start. His first
Oh,
start last year was when the starter Tanner Mordecai was injured, and he only
yeah.
lasted a little more than a quarter in that game before he got hurt himself. But I thought he played well Saturday. They didn't ask him to do too much. The biggest thing that we have seen from Preston, even when he came in last year, is just he's calm, cool, and collected. He's ready to take over and run the offense. He is the highest rated recruit SMU has had over the years, coming out of Parish Episcopal just on the north side of Dallas, and high expectations for him. Certainly didn't show anything to discourage us, I thought, last Saturday. Pretty much kind of played with what they gave him and made most of the throws the right way.
Yeah, Rich, you talked about the D line improvements, and I know on the back end of that defense too, they got I know a transfer I think from West Virginia. The secondaries, I think one of the key matchups is going to be that secondary versus Dylan Gabriel and the Sooners. I guess you could say slew of receivers. They seem to be spreading the ball around again. It was Arkansas State, hard to tell. So I know that matchup's an intriguing. If you had to say one matchup that may be the most intriguing on offense versus defense, either side, what would you choose as that?
I think that secondary definitely. They got three transfers there. Jonathan McGill, safety from Stanford, and then Charles Woods, you mentioned at one corner. Chris Meganson, the other corner, was at Liberty, which is where SMU's defensive coordinator Scott Simons was before he came to SMU. The two corners I thought were totally different than what SMU had here in recent years, and that was something they had to have. They just weren't able to stop anybody on the edge last season. They were bottom, 10, 15 teams in the country giving up yardage, especially in the pass game. So they had to have difference makers there. Those guys are going to have to be big for them this Saturday in Norman. But yeah, I was very encouraged with what we saw for the two corners on Saturday.
Yeah, what about the? It seemed like they had a lot of big plays on Saturday. SMU did down the field. I think I saw a quote from Rhett talking about just how he was happy the way the receivers went up and got contested balls. I know they got the transfer from TCU Hudson. A little bit about that receiving core, if you could.
Yeah, Jordan Hudson had a 67-yard touchdown catch in the first half the other day, and he's a guy who originally committed to come to SMU. When Sonny Dykes went to TCU, he followed him there, played some last year on that team that went to the national championship game, but decided to go ahead and come back to Dallas. And then R.J. Maryland at tight end is one who went up and just, won a 50-50 ball the other day for a touchdown. He's the son of former Cowboy Russell Maryland, too, and he's a sophomore tight end for them, definitely a key player. They still are trying to – they don't have the lead guy at wide receiver. Last year, Rashee Rice was a second-round pick off the team by the Kansas City Chiefs. They don't have that guy, but they've got 6 guys maybe at wide receiver that I think they believe can have a chance to do something big for him. Jordan Curley is a senior on the team this year who can stretch the defense. We saw Jake Bailey, their slot receiver, stretch the defense on one that got called back on a penalty. A lot of options, though, for Preston to throw the ball to at the wide receiver spot.
Yeah, you mentioned a minute ago in the secondary how much and how that's going to be a big matchup for this game. How much does the veteran leadership of Brian Massey play a part in that role?
Definitely Massey does, but, Jonathan McGill is a first-year guy in the program, but he was a captain at Stanford the last couple of years. He's a captain on this team, too. They voted him as a captain. He's a Metroplex kid, too. I think really McGill is kind of the leader in that secondary group, just being a veteran guy. Massey's certainly been around for a while. Also, the other safety who's a returning, Brandon Crossley, are both veteran guys. But McGill kind of is a steadying force back there already for the secondary.
Sticking with the transfers, you got a big add to the running back room in LJ Johnson this offseason. So tell us a little bit about what he adds to the room and just how the rest of the room is shaping up this year.
Yeah, they brought in, as you mentioned, LJ Johnson, but also Jalen Knighton was a transfer from Miami, who actually is the number 1 guy. Knighton is smaller and quicker, although we saw him really pounded it up the middle on Saturday against La Tech. LJ Johnson's more of the big bruising back, and he's the one that broke off a 60-something yard run that allowed them to flip the field right before halftime and go for a touchdown instead of just take a knee and go to the locker room. So a pretty good 1-2 punch they have there with those 2 running backs. Tyler Levine was the leading rusher on this team last year. He's back. And then another guy, Kamar Wheaton, who transferred in from Alabama last year. He was suspended for game 1 because of some academic issues, but should be back this Saturday for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I know they were pretty balanced week 1, and Rhett Lashley, of course, was the coordinator there before becoming the head coach, correct? So I know when everyone thinks of SMU with Tanner Mordecai, everyone thinks, they're going to throw the ball 50 to 60 times a game, but that doesn't seem to be the case. They're a pretty balanced attack.
Rhett doesn't care whether they throw or run, just as long as they're running 80 to 90 plays. That's what he wants, and scoring more touchdowns. And he's perfectly fine if it's 50-50 run pass, if it's 60-40 run pass. He doesn't care. As long as the plays are the right ones, they're working, and they're scoring more. Yeah, he's not beholden to just throwing the football. They certainly have the ability to, but he recognizes, too, that they need to be able to run the ball well to complement the passing game.
What about the move to the ACC? Just allude to that a little bit and talk about, because it's interesting. This would be an SEC-ACC battle if it was a year down the road.
I got to tell you, 23 seasons I've been working here, Friday was one of the biggest days I had seen around here when the invite came and was immediately accepted for SMU to go to the ACC. Obviously, it's potentially a program changer. I know there's a lot of reports about the financial side of it, but SMU's got boosters that are prepared to make that financial side work. This is something that they've been trying to do to get back to a level like this since the Southwest Conference disbanded. The death penalty had a lot to do with it in '87, but the demise of the Southwest Conference after the 95-96 school year has kind of put them in a wandering mode of conferences. The Western Athletic Conference, Conference USA, now the American. Each one of those got better than the previous one, but there's no comparing where they're going to be going into the ACC, the competition they're going to see, the level that they can potentially get to as well. And I know they hit the ground running Friday morning, calling some of those recruits that were on the fence when they last talked to them.
Yeah, SMU has been able to really recruit very well for being that in the American Conference. So to get the opportunity to go to I guess it's now the Power Four, because the Pac-12 is kind of no longer. But get the opportunity to go to the ACC and one of the premier conferences in college football is really interesting for a program like SMU, the historics around it, everything that they've went through over the past 40 years or however long it's been.
Yeah. I mean, they've really made their headway in recruiting too, basically since Sonny Dykes came here in 2018, is the transfer portal. He kind of had figured it out before it was really a thing. Before you got the guaranteed that you didn't have to sit out the 1 year, he was bringing guys in, and Brett Lashley, he worked the first 2 years of that with Sonny as the offensive coordinator before going to Miami, and he's picked up right where he left off. They have 25 D1 transfers on the team this year. Many of them are going to be difference makers for them. And with the addition of the prestige of the ACC, the opportunity that, you could have a better path to the CFP at some point, as well as, hey, on the basketball side, there's no slouch there, obviously, either in the ACC. It should only really benefit their recruiting efforts.
Yeah, Rich, before we get off here, maybe just this is a game that's matchup that really has not happened maybe as often as you would think, as far as, closeness and proximity with OU and SMU. Maybe just talk about if you expect this matchup to be one that maybe is continued in the future, or if, what you think on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I know this is one that SMU kind of fell into because we had to get rid of a North Texas game because it was becoming a conference game. And Oklahoma, it was either a Tennessee or a Georgia home and home, I think, that they had to do away with because the second half was going to be a conference game. And we just had the schedule line up. I know that there's a return game that Oklahoma will be in Dallas in 26 or 27. I got no idea if they'll continue beyond that. TCU's going to end their series with SMU here in a couple of years too. Scheduling is so hard. Especially if leagues start playing 9 conference games like the Big 12's been doing for a while, makes it that much harder. It'd be cool if we got to play a little more often against each other. Definitely, I think there's probably more to gain, obviously, on the SMU side of things. Maybe an unexpected win, also a big gate if you play at home in the series. But, man, scheduling's so hard. I don't like to make predictions on that, college football.
Yeah. Before we get you off here, kind of just give your 3 keys to the game for SMU to pull out the upset on the road at Oklahoma this weekend.
First thing they got to do, I think, is get off to a fast start. They can't let Oklahoma get a couple of quick scores and get the crowd going, get 80,000 people revved up. I think that's the first thing. They have got to be off first. They have to have a quick start. It's kind of cliche, but they have to protect the football. They as improved as this team is this year at SMU, they can't give away free chances and let OU have extra possessions. And then just, do your thing. I mean, this team's pretty good. This team's going to be good at the end of the season. They're going to compete for the American Athletic Conference Championship. So they just need to continue to take that step forward from last week to this week. And I think they have a decent shot at it on Saturday.
Yeah, I think we all agree that this is actually one of OU's tougher opponents throughout the season. So it's going to be interesting on Saturday night. Rich, we really appreciate you taking time to give us a little insight into SMU football and what to expect on Saturday. So we appreciate it, taking the time to do that.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Rich.